This is ChangeMakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Today, my guest is Marcia Davis, the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of the City of Fort Myers. Marcia has spent more than 2 decades in public housing, development, and community development and growth initiatives. And today, Marcia oversees more than 1,300 homes and 2,500 vouchers while building a strong path to stability and upward mobility for families in Southwest Florida. Marcia, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Katie. I'm glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And Southwest Florida has so much going on, like so many communities, but I'm thrilled to highlight specifically what you are doing in several development spaces, disaster recovery, choice neighborhoods. There's just so many things we can talk about. First, I usually like to start this by asking our guests how you got started in housing and maybe some of your backstory before coming to your current position.
I've spent my entire career, in housing and especially with the housing authority. So it's easy for me. I didn't wander different paths, but I got here. But I think my first experience with public housing and Section 8 is as a kid living in public housing. And, when I was living in public housing, it's like, okay, you live over there. And so there wasn't the nicer apartments that you see today and things that are happening. But so I knew what it was like. And then more so in 2000, when I moved to Florida and I started working for the Department of Children and Families because, I truly cared about protecting kids. And I was, straight out of college and had this opportunity. And so I came to Florida and started working as an investigator for the state. And I noticed in our community in Lake County and Fort Myers, we were removing a lot of kids, from one of the bigger public housing sites. And I'm like, there's got to be something we can do, right? It's just, the real issues that some of these families were facing were, the things that we hear about till this day, some challenges they're facing. And here I was in early 20s thinking, gosh, I got to make the decision whether to remove their kid or try to help them, in some form or fashion. And so really tried that. And so I got very familiar with all the public housing sites in my early 20s in Fort Myers. And even went so far as to try to, get with the state and get with the housing authority. Hey, can we, do some kind of preventive program or something, here so that we're not removing as many kids, because I got to be honest with you, it may fix the problem, immediately, but long term, the effects of that on kids is just unbelievable. And so I remember a couple years into that there was an ad, and it was this housing authority, the housing authority of City of Fort Myers was hiring a family self-sufficiency coordinator. And I raised my hand. I said, oh my gosh, that's it. Perfect. That is for me. So I applied and I started in 2003 as a family self-sufficiency coordinator and started learning everything there was. I was one of those nerds and geeks that I went and researched every housing authority under the sun so that I would know I wanted to create the best program, and I got to go learn from all the best. So, that's really how my journey, got started in the housing authority. And then I got exposed to different grants and all the wonderful things that, we started the FSS program. So, now that I look back at all the folks that are graduating, it's amazing to see, after 20 plus years, all the things that have happened. But also that's how I learned development, because we started shortly after, I started of applying for Hope 6, back in the Hope 6 days. So, I learned a lot of that stuff. And, just by happenstance, I always took the road of I'm going to learn everything I can from everybody that's working in and around the housing authority, to include, our consultants and our attorneys. And so I was not formally trained in finance. I can tell you that I was trained from some of the best in the industry, and I credit a lot of my foundation to them. Um, so that led into, years of development in a housing authority, and I ventured out for a little bit, to a larger housing authority, and then I eventually returned back home here to Fort Myers, and I've been back here 7 years, and that is really my story, and I'll be here until I retire, hope God willing.
I've shared some of my own housing insecurity journey, and I appreciate you sharing, some of your backstory and how you grew up. I think there's times where we can point to our definite level of energy and our push and our grit because of our backstories, but we also have a unique ability to talk about how housing can change people's lives for the better through establishing some stability. And I love that you're in a position of leadership that now you get to talk about compliance, development, but yet that fundamental safety that housing can bring. So many people don't realize the connection piece of that. And so, thank you for sharing that. I talked with somebody else recently about FSS. So I'm curious, is there a way that you think, and we're just brainstorming here, is there a way that you think the FSS program should be bolstered more so it can do more? It's really a secret weapon, but it's had its ebbs and flows over the last few years as far as how it's being utilized. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I mean, here lately, we've been a Jobs Plus recipient too, and I think if there was such a way that those 2 programs could be combined, um, or there's some, I haven't put, much thought into it, but, thank you for asking me, but and I don't have the market cornered on all the good ideas, but it would seem to me that maybe some of these things kind of meshing together where there was resources to, it's like a menu of, helping with the rent subsidies and maybe moving on the track afterwards into the savings portion, like the escrow portion, could be a healthy balance, with somebody really starting off and trying. But that would, I think you're right. I mean, they're all, housing authorities look at it, and I'm, no different. Like, hey, how are we playing for these positions? They're important. And I always, tell everyone here, we got to sell this program. And it's, you get your own personal life coach. I mean, people are paying for that stuff today, to, help them. And so I think it's so important. It really is, um, to get, folks involved and to really have that program functioning well. But as any housing authority, you're wondering, how am I going to pay for the positions? How's that going to work out? Where does that fit in? But we just make it a priority because it's got to be something.
Right, right. And it's an untapped resource too, but when you're trying to look across the field of what needs done, sometimes it's not always a priority, but man, it's such a great program to have, to be able to help people. I mean, that escrow feature is very creative, very complicated,
Yeah. Yeah.
very complicated, but it's very creative tool in the toolbox here for housing authorities. You mentioned Hope 6, and I love that you mentioned that because that was one of, way back in the day when I was working at a housing authority, man, back in the Hope 6 days. But fundamentally, it is a way to reposition assets. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that because now it looks a little different, and you guys are having to do more of the rental assistance demonstration. You're having to do tax credit. Talk about some of what's happening in the development space with Fort Myers.
So we started years ago. The Hope 6 was the kickoff to doing that. And that really gets a housing authority. If you continue that, then it happens. So we've finished out our Hope 6 site, And shortly after, I think it was like 2012, we did another 2 developments. One was an old PBRA contract, and one was a public housing site. So, kind of the phenomenon happened. We got 2 allocations of 9% credits, and one was rehab, one was new construction. So that really helped the housing authority, further getting into the development space. And so I came back in 2019. And so I've been, I think, back longer than I was gone. So that's telling you time flies. And we have really pushed, since 2019. I had a strategic plan that was very ambitious. And as I get older, maybe I'm slowing just the ambition down just a little bit, but we're right in the thick of things right now. So we are fully on our way out of the public housing sector. We have built our resources up in our nonprofit affiliate. We want to make sure that all of our new development structures, we are, the proud recipient of a choice neighborhoods. And the amazing things that in those resources it brings to, a housing authority. And we have the added bonus of Urban Strategies doing some resident services here for a number of years. So we're very happy. That has really catapulted. We're, our last public housing site was demolished this past year. I'm sorry. We just turned into 2026. So we're on our way. We are in the building phase. We do co-development. We do self-development. I've got one development that is self-development that's under construction. And we have a CNI phase. Just had a groundbreaking in October. We had in November, the first phase, we had a ribbon cutting. And in our first phase, and maybe just to speak about one project that is really unique, is that the ability to build off-site first so that we can start building some housing, the age-old thing. Let's build some off and we'll move some over and then come back. But we were able to get an off-site. And so there is a road in Fort Myers named 41. It's got like 3 names. When I moved here, I figured that out. I was like, Tamiami Trail, 41, or Cleveland Avenue. And every time when I first moved here, somebody would tell me, all these streets. I'm like, I'm looking for 3 different streets. But anyways, it's the main road through the town. And there was an old car wash, or not a car wash, old Pontiac dealership that was for sale. And it was between the Walgreens and the McDonald's. And we said, that makes a perfect site for housing, don't you think? And sure enough, we went over there and we were able to get it with the partnerships. And I say all this because it's just not me. I have a ton of partners. I have a wonderful city and a county that are behind me. This is just not Marcia's show. This is this whole county's show. And we were able to get this car dealership. The car dealership did have actual Pontiac parts still in it. It was abandoned for years. We were able to get it, and we had to get everybody to, see the dream. And we were building our first phase. It was mixed use and mixed income. So it has some market rate, LIHTC, and affordable units. And it's beautiful. It sets, you talk about, urban design, and the frontage has commercial space. And we just celebrated and had our ribbon cutting in November. It's called Latimer Crossing. We named it after Louis Latimer. He was prominent in developing the filament that went into the Edison light bulb. And if you know Myers, we are known for the Edison Ford Estates. That's big. Edison was very prominent here with one of the laboratories. So, at any rate, the greatest news, part of that development and seeing it, it's just beautiful. On our LinkedIn, we've got this fly around. I mean, gives us such great pride that folks that are below 80% AMI can live there. And they deserve to have a safe and decent, but you cannot tell that between that development in a market rate development. And that is really the whole goal that I have personally and our board have, is that you don't tell the difference. You can't see what's market rate, what's, affordable. And you're not going to be able to tell when you drive by the community, oh, that's an affordable. That was really the guiding point for us. So in the commercial space, we were able to get a commercial component to sign a lease, and it's called Foxtail Coffees. It's a franchise. I think it's fancier than Starbucks. I'm not saying anything about Starbucks, but it is so fancy, and it has a little Kelly's ice cream inside of it, and it's just going to be a wonderful addition to that corridor. We're seeking some other health related services that could take up that commercial space. But can you just imagine being in affordable housing and you're living in this beautiful community? You can walk around just like anybody else, around to the coffee shop and have access to these things. And it really is just beautiful. And it has made such an impact on the city as a whole that, folks that live around and they have people trying to get in all the time. Hey, can we live there? So that's been a really beautiful surprise of our choice neighborhoods that we did not plan as we were, hustling to put this application in. So
You've hit the holy trifecta. It's affordable, it's got aesthetics, and it's an added bonus for the community. So,
yeah.
but absolutely great job there. And that's what is the community, those, community macro grants or initiatives. It's supposed to create the momentum in the community. I mean, yes, it's supposed to do the build and the adding more units, but it's also supposed to generate that true community momentum. So a great return on the investment there, adding into that local economy and the community dynamics. Let's talk about Fort Myers, though, because most people think of Fort Myers as a tourist destination, obviously,
Yeah.
a great one at that, too.
Yeah.
But it is a community of itself. Talk about some of the affordability challenges there for people who are wanting to move in or long-term residents. Like, what are the dynamics happening right now?
Well, I think it's like in any community, there's always a need for affordable housing. We go from, the real estate market's tanking around here, and then all of a sudden it's, skyrocketed. And, since September 2022 and Hurricane Ian, it has changed, the
Mhm.
landscape. And, for the housing authority, we were, smack dab in trying to, in our choice neighborhoods, trying to get it off the ground and get closed and, and with a lot of development. So, uh, we've been recovering, truly from the hurricane and its, destruction and things that just did, not maybe physical, but the construction supply, the labor supply,
Mhm.
um, you know, cost increases, escalation was, starting to be out of this world. We thought we're never going to be able to build affordable housing again, so we've ran the gamut. With that, it did bring the much needed resources to Lee County. And it did that in the form of CDBG DR funds.
Mhm.
And by, Lee County getting $1 billion to rebuild, to our barrier islands and to the infrastructure that was so damaged. And you can see all the stories about Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel and Pine Island, the surrounding little islands to Fort Myers. It was just devastating. So our county has done an amazing job of getting out the CDBG DR. They broke it up into their buckets, and one bucket happens to be housing, and they committed, I think it was 300 million plus to housing initiatives. And there was rehab, then there was new construction and, rebuild our homes. But we applied as the housing authority and our nonprofit affiliates, because what happens is a lot of our development projects started suffering major gaps.
Mhm.
And, you know, not all of us can go out and find 10, 15 million to fill a gap, like, on a dime. But we were like, gosh, we got to have some relief. And that's exactly what it was for. The county put out, this money. And so we were able to get one of our choice neighborhoods phases, a gap filled, closed up, ready to go. That closed in October. Um, I have a new construction. It filled the gap of 20 million instantly. 230 units will be going up next month. It's starting construction. I have 27 million that I was awarded just for rehab. And I mean rehab in my light tech deals that, are at almost at the end of their life cycle as far as in the compliance period. And everybody's taking depreciation, so insurance is not paying anything. So we were stuck in this, real quandary. How do you do that? Get fix all these necessary things to keep these things going. And so we're using a lot of funding for our rehab of even our light tech deals that may have some subsidy attached to them. And then we have one new construction of a senior facility that will be, the most hurricane resistant senior facility that we build with a generator that will run the entire building and the apartments. Now, we have built it, almost just as, short of being the hurricane shelter standard, which you would basically have no windows. We built to that standard so that our residents, in particular seniors, would be, protected. I'm knocking on wood. We don't have to experience this ever again, but it is extremely difficult on, low income seniors. And so we take that into account when we're building what's going to be in the best. And can we help others? I built it so that the ground floor could house another 40 seniors or disabled folks so that in case, we're not, it's like buying our own insurance policies. Um, so that is where we've been. We've been fortunate. I think our grand total of recovery money that the county awarded us was 80 million, and that is a huge commitment to this housing authority on behalf of the county and all of our developer partners of getting all of our development going. So you talk about pressure, we got it. But it's a huge blessing, and none of this would have happened had it not been for that infusion. I mean, we've had a lot of stuff going on, but, being in this business, one wrong turn could tank a deal and it it's not revivable anymore, so, um, that's how we've been going, and things are starting to pick up, and things are starting to, look better for, folks that are interested in homeownership and, possibilities because, that's one of the goals if our family efficiency folks wanna go to homeownership. Not all of them wanna go, Um, but there's some homes that they would like to buy, now that we're building the apartments and they're so beautiful, it's a real toss up for some of them. Like, I don't know if I love this
Right.
apartment.
I'm glad you mentioned the preservation strategies that you're doing and rehabbing existing, because we do talk a lot about building new, but we also have to remember that you've got aged stock out there that has to be preserved too, but you don't always have the resources to come in and do these multi-million dollar renovations and rehabs. So it sounds like you guys have taken something bad that happened to the community and then be able to leverage it with those disaster recovery funds to be able to truly address them, not just age stock, but improve it with hurricane standards. We've had
Yeah.
some guests on the past from Alaska and the Virgin Islands who have talked about on the podcast that the cost of doing business because of the standards that you have to have is completely different than other communities. And you had the tool by which you can address some of those. Do you see that um, tension now playing out in a post disaster recovery setting? Like how moving forward now, building and preserving, how are you guys going to be able to tackle to try to build it to those hurricane standards then, or to try to improve it, um, possibly without those disaster funds? Like what's the landscape moving forward now?
I think for us, that's all I can speak to is preservation is important. We have LIHTC deals that are about to go through a refinance, and recapitalization, go through a RAD conversion. It's time to they may be the last few phases that have public housing subsidy in them that will fully get us out of the public housing arena. Um, we are trying our best to, maintain those because, when I look back at them, I feel like we just built them yesterday. And then you look and you're like, yeah, it has been 15 years. And then, you start thinking, am I getting that old? Um, but, we have to preserve some of these things and we needed new stock in certain circumstances. Um, the thing now is construction prices are not going down, even though we love that. But, I don't see anybody going down. It may not be escalating at the same rate. So the expenses in which to do, you have to look at all resources. And I think that was probably going to swirl me into, one of the things I think I was with one of your team members, Jim, of talking about RAD to commissioners. And, my number one thing, there's no big secret to RAD. There's a RAD resource desk. You can go, Google it. That'll give you everything under the sun. But the one question I think, everybody asks themselves is you got to have a plan. You got to have a strategic plan. And, how descriptive or how simple, you gotta know where you're going with these things because, we're in that time that we have to try to start preserving and building at the same time because the need is not going away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shout out to Jim Evans.
Yeah.
We'll name him as we talk about him.
Yeah.
you know, and he's done some great job leveraging housing authorities to understand what some of those development strategies need to be, not to just kind of deal with the funding at hand, but then how to plan forward on what needs to happen, how to make sure those deals are not falling apart, because there's been some housing authorities that have gotten to the table and couldn't leverage resources, couldn't work through the compliance hoops. And you recently joined a panel with some Quadel experts talking about just this very same thing. Would you
Yeah.
like to share some of the points that you covered related to housing authorities utilizing some of these tools today and moving forward?
I think that was one of my main keys. It was, what commissioners should know is one, you want to know how the agency is going to survive financially. And a couple things, the writing has been on the wall for a very long time about public housing. So I don't think that's new news, but it could be new news to some folks. And you got to catch up a little bit that it's really, you've got to have a long-term financial plan for an agency. It has to be around so that we can serve the people. And how do you do that? And what does your business plan look like for the future? Even with all of your deals, even if you don't manage them as a housing authority, what is your financial plan for moving forward? And that you can sustain these things and hopefully, build more as you go along. I think that was one of the key things is having a plan and executing. I don't have some big secret up here other than I had a plan. And every day we're just executing it. And some days we have to take 10 steps back, but it is the same plan. It was the same thing and it hasn't changed. And we're almost, another couple of years we'll be done with it. And then, the other thing that I shared with commissioners during this talk is, there's so many resources at HUD and they're a little complicated, but there's a lot of folks like you, Katie, that can help, decipher through some of the regulations. But RAD is so, gives you the ability to be very creative.
Mm-hmm.
If you think outside of the box,
Right.
transfer of assistance, what is possible? And I think, sometimes, folks have just, I got to just do this because it's here on this site and that's where I got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you give yourself, what is best for the community? Like, you know, I have more land next to one of my places, but is it best for the community in this neighborhood for me to build even more and, and increase the density to its, that was the whole point. We got our Hope 6 is not to do that, to lower density. And so, being able to think outside the box, no idea is a dumb idea, lay it all out there and be like, and kind of work through, the ideas of what you think could be a possibility. And one of the things I've heard early on is I always dream in color. I always think everything's possible till it's not.
You do a lot of collaborating in the community, whether it's with development partners or whether it's within community organizations. What are some of the secret tools that's making you guys and making you so successful with that community partnering concept? Do you want to share a few of those?
Well, that I can tell you, in particular, Lee County we have a community foundation that's named the Collaboratory, and they really spearheaded this among all the providers and different disciplines. And it was probably a low result. There was a resiliency plan put together after the hurricane. It took a year. Everybody, the health and wellness and everybody sit on a committee and it got everybody talking again, right? Everybody's working in silos, and we've all been there. We've seen this ebb and flow of, hey, we're all going to work together. And then next year, everybody's kind of still, with their head down and moving forward. But this really brought this to an intentional point. And the collaboratory developed coalitions. We've got a housing coalition. We've got a health coalition. And it really is these major players in the community. You can't be that you send somebody that can't make any decisions. It has to be the person that can commit the decision and the resources and be intentional. And so, and a part of that, if nothing else happened here, everybody talks to each other. And that has really been the game changer. Everybody is starting to know, why is it so important that we have health? Why is it so important that we have grocery and food and so close to where people live? I mean, it's important. And why is it important that we have good schools? We all know that, but the physical structures and what's there. Why is it that we have good housing? It's wonderful that if I can provide housing to people, but if it's substandard stuff, is that really doing? I mean,
Right.
but we can do better. We know better, so now we can do better. And so that in itself, I think, has made everybody here in Lee County more successful because everybody has come together in these different groups to work together that normally may have not even understood how we all played a part. I play a part in affordable housing,
Mhm.
you play a part in health, you play a part in home ownership. And yes, government, you play a part in county. Maybe there's some restrictions and stuff that we need to remove, zoning restrictions. I mean, there's a couple things, but I can say that has really truly been the key,
Mm-hmm.
at least for Lee County, and how really make an intentional effort. And there's another generation, a younger generation that is coming up, and they're so excited about collaboration, and that is amazing to watch too, because that keeps a lot going. It's been such an educational process for most, some of the attorneys from the court getting involved and understanding what an eviction does to a
Mhm.
resident's record, and how do we prevent that? Legal aid has become our best friends. We work together. We work together with legal aid. We enjoy having a good relationship because they can help us and we can help them. And it's not an adversarial relationship here. That has been key. And so it keeps a lot of accountability for both.
Mhm.
Um, so that I think those really are the secret sauces. Everybody is playing in the sandbox together.
And that is not something that you see in a lot of communities. So just you laying that out to others is quite an industry challenge to try to make that happen too. I don't know many housing authorities who are going to say legal aid is their friend. Um,
Yeah, maybe I'm the only one for day, but, uh,
but I mean, because everybody, and not that it's them or you guys, it's just
yeah,
that they're competing interests, and it makes it really, really hard when you don't have a baseline of cooperation and understanding, even the regulations that govern the process.
right,
So, it's not that, there's this inherent animosity, obviously. It's just that, people are coming at lease enforcement or leases or what people should be doing from completely different vantage points. But you guys have built the groundwork to form a more collaborative relationship.
yeah, and that really has been key because, they're fighting, they don't want evictions on the tenants'
Yeah.
records, we've worked around some of that, how can we, you know, think outside the box so that, this is not hurting a
Mhm.
family that is still gonna be in need of
Right.
affordable housing
Right.
once they're out of my stuff, if that's not, their forever point.
Mhm.
And we got that leads to homelessness. And how do we solve that? I mean, so
Right.
everybody started to get like this is why we really got to try to tackle some of these issues that are preventing homelessness really and helping further that we don't have any. So that's been a big part of the key. and and I think for us and our success to make sure our projects are going is we go after everything just like everybody else. And I stand up there just with the rest of them. Listen, we deserve it just as much as anybody else. We're on a mission to build affordable housing for the future, and I got to have the resources.
Mhm.
I didn't say I guilted people into it, but maybe a little bit.
Well, it helps when you have the community wrapped around what you're doing, and you're building that awareness, you're leveraging expertise. So, I mean, it's a great job to be able to put your housing authority as a leader in this space because you can't just sit and say, the units we have are the units we have. I mean, you guys are really you know bringing all of the things together to preserve what you have, but then
Yeah.
build more, and that's a tricky balance there.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. Again, I've been talking with Marcia Davis, the executive director of the Housing Authority of the City of Fort Myers. Thank you so much, Marcia. I appreciate what you're doing and keep up the great work for Fort Myers and Southwest Florida. We appreciate the success by which you guys are moving affordable housing forward.
Thank you, Katie. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.